Social Media Union Podcast.
Oh, hi, listeners. Welcome to the next episode of the Social Media Union Podcast. I am your host, Jenna. We have a really special episode today. So much so, I'm still pretty flabbergasted that he's agreed to come on, but I'm super psyched that he is here. But before we get started, I just want to give a brief introduction to who the Social Media Union is. So if you're a first-time listener, hey, the Social Media Union is a membership community for social media professionals who want to support one another, knowledge share, and really people who give a shit about ethics. We learn from each other and from guests like those that we have on today about how we can do our job better, more effectively, and more ethically. So if you're interested in membership, head to our website. It's thesocialmediaunion.com. Founder membership is currently open. It's just £15 a month, and you'll find on the website, exactly what it is that you get for that. But basically, a ton of resources, templates. We're adding in more every month, and we also run this podcast. And some of our podcasts are for members only. So some are public, some private. We save the really good ones for our paying members because it's what they deserve. So yeah, let's just get started. Mystery guest, will you please reveal yourself and give us a brief intro?
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is David Wilding. I am Director of Planning at Twitter in the UK. I've been at Twitter for nearly 8 years. And basically what I do in my job is help brands, advertisers, organizations, and people to get the best out of the most weird and wonderful comms platform in the world, in my opinion. So yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Good, because that's what all my questions are about today. So that works
that's good.
particularly well. Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'm going to have to say is obviously the last few weeks at Twitter have been, interesting. I don't want to push you for an answer on this, but it would be remiss of me not to ask for the podcast how it's been for you and how it feels internally at Twitter at the moment.
Yeah, it is obviously a weird time. Whenever a company's about to be taken over, of course, there's a usual sort of human thing about how will it affect things and how will it affect, my job and what I do. And then, of course, I think there's wider issues regarding what we think or potentially are his plans for the platform. We just don't know is the honest answer. So after that initial period of just excitement and concern, potentially a combination of both of those things sort of internally, we're sort of ignoring it now, to be honest, because it's the only way to survive sort of on a day-to-day basis, and we'll see what happens on that front. But it's never a dull moment at Twitter, and to be honest, you're just used to stuff happening all the time. I've never worked anywhere where it's just wild, so much happens all the time. And then something is huge one day and then something else is huge the next day. So you kind of just sort of learn to roll with that, really. But thanks for asking. We're all good.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you so much for answering for us. It's about where I thought it probably would be at the moment. I think not everyone appreciates when these sorts of things happen and takeovers happen, like how long they actually take to go through, that it's not.
And I think a lot of people think it was. So even, you saw people who'd like accounts previously banned from Twitter going, well, Musk's taken over now, so we're going to come back. And you're just like, well, no, nothing's changed. We're very much sort of carrying on as well. And as you say, this thing could well take months. So yeah, we'll take each day as it comes. I sound like a football manager doing cliches. Honestly, it's the only way to actually, So yeah, we carry on.
Absolutely. Okay, so going on to what is actually definitely happening.
Yes.
The next question I've got for you is really kind of if you can give us a précis of what's happening on Twitter over the next, I guess, to the end of this year, the next 12 months, really that bearing in mind like our listeners are all social media professionals. So what is it that they need to know about that's coming up on the platform?
Sure. So, I mean, where do we start?
It's a big question.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of what's happening, obviously whatever happens in the world happens on Twitter, and we know that. So yeah, big things happening for the rest of 2022 will obviously happen on Twitter. We're getting really excited about, for example, the Women's Euros coming up in July, the World Cup coming up at the end of the year, Love Island's about to start. You know, we know that these things will sort of be big and huge on Twitter. We just had Eurovision, which was amazing. So you kind of give a sense of the time of recording. But in terms of the actual sort of product development, we're focusing really on a couple of different things. So one is actually conversations. So actually giving people different ways to have conversations on Twitter. So what that means is spaces. I presume that a lot of your listeners have tried out spaces, but they really are sort of growing and lots of fun. So audio spaces to have a conversation. It's kind of a podcast meets a panel at a conference meets a chat. And it's a sort of meets a radio phone in. So it's like a weird and wonderful thing. We've just launched communities as well, which is a way of having slightly more just different and private conversations on Twitter. So our big focus is how do we give people more ways to have conversations? You might remember, do you remember fleets that appeared on Twitter briefly?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the same sort of thing. So experimenting with who's to say that the only way to communicate on Twitter is in a tweet with a limited number of characters. And actually there are so many ways to communicate on Twitter. So we're just trying all of them, because ultimately what we say is that Twitter is about a public conversation. And we're just seeing other ways in which people can sort of have those conversations. So we're doing that. The other thing we're doing is focusing on interests. So again, big rollout of topics, making it easier to find the stuff you're interested in, rather than asking people to do the heavy lifting itself. And then, of course, the ongoing thing that we're doing is making sure that people are getting the right information and accurate information on Twitter, which is wider issues to do with just ensuring that the conversation is healthy and you can trust it. So those are the main sort of three pillars: interest, conversations, and health. But underneath that is just to say a bunch of just innovation right now. So yeah, we're trying a lot of stuff.
Awesome. So with topics, what's the best way, kind of, if you're a social media manager and you're looking after a brand account, what's the best way for them to kind of use that product?
Well, Topics really is a consumer product for our users. So it's basically, if you are interested in, say, live example, This Is Us, saw it on the telly last night, great show. I can follow the topic and get tweets from that, show into my timeline, say, all the actors in it, anyone tweeting about it and that kind of stuff. We don't really yet have a facility where you can say, I want to own that topic as a brand. But of course, as ever, it's just good practice to join in the conversations that you think that your audience, and most importantly, your brand, has something to say about. So it's just a way of ensuring that people are getting the information that's most relevant to them, really.
And professional accounts. This is something that we've been actually talking about in the office this very morning. So it'd be really interesting to hear more about that.
Well, it's still very much, we think it's a big opportunity here, because we know so many businesses use Twitter to just connect with people, and that's just helping people to distinguish between what's a professional account and what isn't. Still early stages. I don't really know too much about it, to be honest with you, but it's something that we're definitely looking to roll out, and it's just one of many things that people are sort of trying and experimenting. So what would be interesting would be to see what ultimately takes off, and what ultimately sort of we sort of look at and think, well, maybe we should be focusing sort of somewhere else right now. But what I can say is that we are sort of innovating faster than I've ever known in my time at Twitter. It really is, the speed of sort of innovation. That's something that Parag, the CEO, is really keen to make sure that we're doing as well. So. Yeah,
it feels like there's like an announcement in the press. Like, it feels like it's every week at the moment. There just seems to be so much going on. So yeah, it's very exciting to hear about all the things that are coming up. Yeah. This is a really vague question, so kind of feel free to interpret it as you like. But the question is, how would you like to see brands using Twitter? So what I mean by it really is, you will spend, presumably, a fair amount of time on Twitter. And do you feel like there's any gaps that people don't really, or say people like brand managers, social media managers and brands are like missing? What opportunities are they missing on the platform, or what would you want to see them doing more of?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, actually. And we get asked it a lot. And I think the answer that I would give is simply, the thing that I want brands to do on Twitter is the thing that brands are doing elsewhere, but through a Twitter lens. There's a real danger sometimes, I think, when people come to all social media, that you end up doing that sort of how do you do fellow kids GIF? So you sort of behave in a way you think, well, you have to do that on this platform. And of course there's an element of that, but you've got to actually have a strategy, right? You've got to know what is it we're trying to achieve overall, what's our objective, marketing objective, and how does any platform fit in with that. But in terms of Twitter specifically, we've actually just done some research on this, which was called Real Talk. So if you go to Twitter, but hashtag Real Talk, you will see lots of tweets from Twitter marketing. And within that, basically, there's three things that we think are important for brands to think about. One is their topics. So which topics are they going to be joining in? The guidance there is really, if you've got something to actually say and you can add some value, then do it, but don't feel like you have to get involved in every single topic under the sun. It's like National Sandwich Day, you've got nothing to do with sandwiches, stay well away from it, but tone is the second one, and that's really, really important. So tone of voice on Twitter. And actually what we found in our research is that a lot of brands are starting to sound the same, and people on Twitter have noticed that kind of similar tone. You get lots of things, so you need a tone of voice that extends your natural tone of voice as a brand. And I guess the key question there is, does your brand have a distinctive tone of voice anyway, which is important, and if it does, then sort of evolve with Twitter. And then the final one is communities. So what communities are you looking to speak to, but also to support? And what you sometimes still do see is brands coming in certain times of year. So for example, Pride Month next month, you may well see a lot of brands sort of coming not just to Twitter but everywhere, and going, hey, we're all here for Pride, and putting rainbows all over stuff, and then disappearing afterwards. Whereas, the better brands are kind of hanging around and actually doing something for the LGBTQ plus community and beyond just that sort of badging. So it's tone, topics, and community. Trying to be as distinctive as possible with those things. It's not always possible because, of course, but the better brands, certainly organically, are the ones who know who they are, and bring that to Twitter rather than sort of starting with the blank space, because you very quickly sound like start to sound like everybody else, which is a bit of a challenge sometimes.
It's a huge part of what we're trying to do with SMU is what you mentioned with Pride. So we want to use our voice to share basically how brands can communicate during those times effectively and more ethically. So for every major event, inverted commas, not quite sure what else to call all these different things throughout the year, but those events, like how to better do it. So International Women's Day, don't just have like a kind of boss bitch code and for 10% off and all that kind of thing. It's very it's not it's not authentic to it, and people just see straight through it. So even from a marketing perspective, like your consumers are just gonna go like, what is that? Like, what
did you
is
see
that?
the International Women's Day equal pay bot this year? Do you see that?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
It's a really great example of something that exposes exactly that, which is the gap between words and action. And of course, words are important. Of course, saying the right thing does matter, but you have to back it up with some sort of action, I think, in order to be credible. And what they did, I'm sure listeners will know, is that they created this wonderful automated bot. It was a couple of people, Ali. She was called Frances. We had her at an event a couple of weeks ago. She was superb.
Oh, cool.
Just chatting about it, and she basically created this bot with her partner, and they basically, scraped the government's pay website, pay transparency website thing. Do you know what I mean? There's a thing on the government website where you can basically see the pay gap, the gender pay gap, and they scraped that. And any company or organisation that tweeted about International Women's Day, they basically put an automated tweet out with a quote tweet saying, in this organisation, women are paid X% less than men. And it was just very transparent. It was just smart use of the data. Didn't try and make an aggy point about it, but of course it was interpreted in a way that went, whoa, there's a real disparity between that data and what you're saying here. And it's fascinating to see how brands sort of reacted to that. And some of them just responded and went, yes, we know we have to do better, and we're committed to that, which I thought was quite a good response. Others panicked and deleted their original tweet, which is understandable, but actually I think it's better to say, we know we've got more work to do here.
Acknowledging it.
Exactly. So that's a great example, I think, of that thing. It's not just about saying, hey, we think this, it's Pride Month, and then working out that actually you've got policies of the company that might completely contradict that. You
absolutely.
See, football clubs owned by Saudi Arabian regimes where homosexuality is banned, tweeting about how wonderful it is that the Blackpool footballer Jake Daniels came out as gay. I get why they're doing it, and they should be doing it, but there's that massive sort of discrepancy with their other values seemingly. So
it's kind of what SMU was born out of, really, that the discrepancy between the two, and kind of what we as social media managers can do to just make online that little bit better. We're not the only people doing this by a million miles, but it feels, I can often feel embarrassed about working in social media. So I've been in it for nearly 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And
embarrassed in what way?
So it's a good question. The immediate response back is kind of always like 9 times out of 10 is oh God, I hate social media. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, that's what I dedicate my life to, but sure. And it's what's so much part of my life being. And I just thought, is there a way that we can just make it that little bit better? And, by agreeing to our code of ethics is such a small part of that, but it's this ongoing education and kind of what can we do during these times to just make our platforms that little bit better, that little bit more authentic, and that little bit more ethical, so we can kind of feel a bit better about what it is that we do for a living. So I think, you will know better than anyone really how negative these spaces can be, and Twitter is a prime example of that, and how negative that space is. And I've certainly turned it off from time to time, like if I feel like it's too much, and just going, right, I have to be out for a bit. And now, like, especially with launching the organization, I'm back into it, kind of easing myself back into it gently. And how can I do that in a way that's I'm not going to see the things like I desperately don't want to see, and things that will affect I guess just my mood. Like, I don't want to be as big as like mental health, but just like, I just see something and you just go, oh my God, that's just made me really sad.
I think there's a few things in that. There's a lot of things in that. I think there is, and I agree with you in terms of social media. The reason I work at Twitter is that I love Twitter as a platform, and I always have, actually. I loved it way before I worked here. And I've always found, I think I was quite, lucky in that very early, I found a huge amount of value in it. Suddenly I was just following a bunch of people who I didn't necessarily know, who were tweeting out interesting thoughts, stuff I've not thought about, funny stuff, hilarious stuff. And I thought, I like these people. These are my people. And that was like the core. Lots of people are nostalgic about old Twitter, but it's still there. It really is. It's just that the narrative around Twitter, from a sort of if you don't use Twitter a lot, or if you are a journalist or it's involved in politics, you have a perception that Twitter's a bunch of people arguing about the state of the world and calling each other out, and it isn't. We actually did some research last year called Twitter Is, which your listeners should look up, and we basically had a look at what is the typical experience for people on Twitter. And we identified 27 different experiences.
Oh, interesting.
It's a lot. And we put them in eight different clusters. But one of the clusters was effectively what we called sort of news and views and what have you. So that's basically, something happens, people do a response to it and say, hey, this has happened, and you immediately get that thing. And then another one is basically speaking out. So holding truth to power and basically saying this is wrong and this must change. And together, both of those can feel quite heavy. It's important. I think speaking up and saying, this government is, needs to sort this out is important. And I think we're actually proud of the way that Twitter gives people a voice to actually, speak truth to power and things. But if that's your only Twitter diet, it feels quite heavy. But it's actually about 20 to 25% of the typical Twitter experience. If you're 18-year-old person comes to Twitter in university, you're going to be having a very different experience. You'll typically be following things you're interested in, your passions, lots of funny accounts, that kind of stuff. So it's important to sort of, I think, put it in context. And some of the experiences that we talk about, we're really proud of. So when you see strangers come together to lift each other up on Twitter, it's the most incredible thing. And we see that sort of week in, week out. We do a thing internally at the end of each week called Twitter Stories, where we just talk about how someone in the world has used Twitter in a remarkable way that week. And we're never short of content. It's absolutely everywhere. So it's there. It's not just in corners of Twitter. It's everywhere. How often do you just sort of we just had the Agatha Christie trial this week, and of course there's a serious element to that. But you remember that day on Twitter when the whole thing broke, it's Rebecca Vardy's account thing. It was hilarious. I mean, it was funny and hilarious and that kind of stuff. So I think it's important to sort of remember that. If, however, you think this is all getting too much, yes, of course, you have to be using it day in, day out. But also there are a whole bunch of tools which I don't think we've done a great job at telling people about that exist that can basically make a huge difference to your Twitter account if you use them well. So I've got a bunch of people blocked just because, not because I think, well, I'm trying to stop their free speech, just because they're morons. I've got no interest in hearing from people. And without Twitter, I wouldn't be hanging out with these people and saying, hey, let's hear what this person's got to say, because they're genuinely not the people I want to hang out with. And that's a decision I can make. But also muted words makes a massive difference. So you can mute any word on Twitter. And I kind of urge people to do it. So I've got like defunds the BBC muted because it's morons tweeting it, in my opinion. And I don't need to hear that. So I've got it muted and I never do. And I've got, and it does make a huge difference. It really does. So you can also, it's great for muting spoilers as well. So if you haven't watched Derry Girls, put it on mute for 24 hours and then you basically get to watch it before.
Oh yeah, nice.
And so
I didn't think about using it like that. It's a good way.
There's probably common use for it. So there are so many sort of ways in which you can do that as well. So I often sort of tweet out these little threads about hey, here's a bunch of features that nobody knows about. And people I see on Twitter day in, day out go, oh, I didn't do that. So there's that. And then other things that I do is I use lists, for example. So lists are just a great way to to make sure you're seeing the stuff from the people you want to see. One of my lists is called radiators, which is nothing to do with plumbing, but I think there's kind of two types of people in the world. There's radiators and there's drains. And I'd rather follow the radiators and mute the drains personally. And it's just funny stuff. It's just people who I love talking to who, and I got them in the list so I don't miss any of their tweets. And that is just a really positive aspect to Twitter as well. So it's a bit perception, it's a bit reality, because I say 20% isn't nothing, but it's an important 20% because Twitter's done some incredible things to move society on that we're really proud of. And it's a bit actually just making sure people know that the tools are there, and then a little bit sort of self-control as well. So yeah, and I'm going on here, but Twitter isn't social media. It really isn't. Twitter is a really unique thing, and there's overlap, of course, with other platforms, but it isn't really used for people to, there are challenges with Twitter, but what it isn't, generally speaking, is people projecting that they're having a better time than they really are. It just doesn't happen on Twitter. It happens in some corners, but you know what I mean? It's people are raw and really honest on Twitter. And, I would say from a mental health perspective, yes, of course, there's challenges with that, but the amount of people who actually use Twitter to speak up about their mental health, break any stigmas and taboos, and to reach out to each other who are clearly in need of travel is amazing. So one of the Twitter stories I talked about, we had a man called Edmund O'Leary who actually came and chatted about it. He sent out a tweet saying, I'm not okay. If you see this tweet, can you say hello? And he got 103,000 replies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with people just going, hey, Edmund, or everyone just sort of pining, just sort of love bombing him. And that's incredibly powerful. So, and as I say, it happens sort of day in and day out. So I think it's incumbent on us to go, fundamentally, people are good. I genuinely believe that. And if you give them the right things to talk about and let them come together, they're creative and funny and hilarious and supportive. But it isn't necessarily the Twitter that you see if you're, I don't know, Laura Kunsberg, for etc. And I get that. So it is a little bit of all of that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important for us. Like, there's always so much. I always feel like these podcasts are always like so selfish because I always take away like so much myself from them. I'm like scrolling notes down as I do in every interview. And I think again, like, bringing it back to SMU, and because this is what I want to do with my own life, it's like how we have to spend all day on social because it's our job. And I think doing what we can to protect ourselves as much as possible. Like, I don't mute any words. Like, why am I not doing that? Why am I not like kind of protecting myself and actually like taking that time out, just taking an hour out to just make sure that I've got these really positive lists, because I do it on Instagram. So why am I not doing it on Twitter? On Instagram, like I have a hard and fast rule. Like if I see a single post that makes me feel anything other than kind of joy or positive or anything like that, if it makes me feel crap, then I unfollow them and they're gone. And I feel my world on Instagram is a very positive one. And I don't feel like now I'm like admitting this out loud. I've never done the same on Twitter where I go, okay, let's better curate this channel for me. And it's something I really want to use Twitter. Look, we were talking about this morning. I was just like, we've got to use it more for SMU. Like, this is where the conversations are happening. I want to be talking to people about ethics and social media. Like, it's such an eternally fascinating subject, and to get other people's views on it, and like talking to people like yourself about like how we can kind of better protect ourselves on these platforms and make our little corner of it that little bit better is just really important.
I think so.
Okay, so more on a kind of a bit of an obvious question, really, bit of a beige one, but something I'm genuinely interested in is if there was one thing that you could tell the average social media manager about Twitter, and what would you want to share with them?
Oh gosh, it's probably in the previous answer, to be honest with you. The fact that Twitter is, in my, not always, but it has potential to be joyful and hilarious and funny, and actually probably I'd say don't overthink and don't over worry about sort of negative pushback. I think that's the thing that we see quite a lot. Often it's unspoken. So because of the public nature of Twitter, people perhaps, I think, and this is people as well as some brands, they can feel vulnerable putting stuff out there because it's not necessarily seen as a safe space, and the perception is that you'll get all these replies. But, and again, sorry to be the research guy, but we did some sort of research on brand replies, so replies to tweets from brands, and we actually found that they had almost zero impact on perception of the brand from a sort of a negative perception. So things feel very big when they are close up and when they're happening now. It's like that Father Ted sketch, but in reverse. When he's like going, he's got two cows, one in the field and a little small. He goes, this cow is small and that one is far away. It's always like an iconic sketch. It's always like with Twitter, things that when you're the brand manager on a brand and you get one reply, it feels massive. It's like, oh God, and someone's going to see this and all that kind of stuff. To everybody else, it's completely irrelevant. We are all so busy getting on with our lives that no one's thinking that much. I mean, everyone's the center of their own universe, aren't they? And I think that's true of brands as well. So we see brands, really good established brands, who just panic at the first sight of anything. They'll get 30 great replies and one negative one. Human nature being what it is, everyone focuses on the one negative one. And again, here's a feature, you can hide replies to your tweets, which again, we should tell people about that. But if you send out a tweet and you get one that's irrelevant or spammy or abusive, just hide it. And then it won't be underneath your tweet. It will be in a little section called hidden replies if people want to sort of click on that. You can also control your conversation on Twitter. So if you don't want any replies, right from the very beginning, you just put out a tweet and turn replies off, which is who can reply to this tweet? Everyone, or just people I follow, or just people I've mentioned, which can mean mentioning no one. And these are really almost simple, basic things that we've had for a while now, but people don't quite, or a lot of brand managers don't quite sort of embrace them. And I think it's because they want the positive, of course they want the positive aspects of social media. They want to be told they're great, but they fear being told they're not. So I guess my message would be, come in, the water's lovely. There's nothing to be fearful of here. And if something goes wrong, then you've got loads of ways to fix it. But genuinely, nothing will. You're more likely to be ignored than responded to negatively. So just try.
Yeah, I think I think anyone working in social is like naturally risk averse for that exact reason. The conversations I've had with clients and over the years about, are we going to post this? And which is why like there's not as much like reactive content, because the amount of thought that it had to go. I'm thinking of a specific national brand that I worked with last year, and the amount of people would have to go up and then back down, and then it would have to go to the lawyers, and then it would have to the lawyers, and then it would have to come back to us. And by then you're like, oh well, the moment's been and gone, guys. Like, we are, what was funny is now just a shell of its former self. And I think anyone working in social listening has probably been through that 100 times. And we've worked with clients. We had a massive crisis with one of our clients a few years ago that still genuinely haunts me. And I'm like, I can't tell you like how much it affected me, because we were reading, or I was reading in the middle of the night, tweets and Facebook posts and all sorts, like across all platforms. You should just go and kill yourself, die now, like this family, blah, blah, blah. It was just horrific. And it's not about me, but I'm the one reading it. And I think so often people on these platforms don't realize there's someone like myself sat behind a screen like reading all this stuff, and it's just awful. And I think to actually feel empowered to mute these and feeling like, no, we have to leave it there because it's balanced conversation, all this kind of stuff. No, actually some people are just, like you said, like they're just the worst, and we don't have to keep those kind of replies in them, and that can be part of a strategy.
Absolutely. You don't owe these people anything. You really don't.
Yeah. You're so right. I don't know why I don't think about this more often. Like, why do I
would say feedback says as much, if not more, about the person giving it than it does about the thing it's feeding back on. And that's true in life, so to go all profound, but it's also true a lot on social media. So yeah, I would honestly, you don't know, abusive people, you owe nothing. Mute them, block them, turn their replies off, and don't worry about it. And what you'll find in the main is that they've got very few followers and very sort of limited sort of influence. So I would have no hesitation in sort of taking all the conversation controls we've got available. So do it.
Okay, listeners, take on board, action that, do it now. It's there for a reason. Like, utilize these opportunities you have on platform to just make life that little bit easier and a little bit better. Well, I just have one final question for you. I'm giving you no pre-warning to this either, so I apologize, because normally I tell people beforehand, and for a reason I haven't today.
Do I have to sing?
No singing involved. No, absolutely not. It's really just who, if you can tell the listeners one person to follow, I'm gonna guess on Twitter, who would you want to tell them to follow? So it can just be for joy, for humor, knowledge, anything.
Sorry, are there other platforms apart from Twitter? I don't know.
I'm not aware of any. No,
there's so many. So that radiated list that I just referred to. I would say, so there's a guy, Nick Walker, who is I think Nick W _84 or something. He works at Channel 4 in their PR team, and he's hilarious and just funny and tweets about telly, and he's kind, and he doesn't sort of punch down or punch up. He just enjoys his life and shares absurd stuff. And he also runs the Daytime Snaps account, which is a must follow account, and it just posts photos of daytime TV without any context, and it's brilliant. So follow Nick and follow Daytime Snaps. Follow Susie Dent, who's wonderful, does her word of the day. She's absolutely brilliant. Follow someone called Paula Bell, who's just brilliant, tweeting about her experiences, her life. So you must follow her as well. Honestly, I could sort of go on forever. There was just loads and loads of people who just sort of make your day a bit better just by sort of following them on Twitter and having a chat with them. So all those people. I should probably give it a more sort of definitive answer, but it's not, the people who are famous on Twitter for big followings often, for me, don't model the type of behavior that I like to see on Twitter. So, small Twitter is good, and small Twitter can very quickly become a big Twitter in a positive thing.
And just one final thing for me, for the listeners, what I'll do is get all of the research and put it into a post in the library, so you can access all of that and just find all those links easily. And I'll also pop in to Discord about who David thinks we should follow. So I'll pop that in there so you can go off and follow those people, and perhaps we'll put that on Twitter as well. But yeah, we'll get all of that research into a post so you can find that easily, because that's what it's all about, making life easier for everyone.
Yeah, I guess I have to find the links myself and then find them for you. But yeah, we'll do that. We definitely
thank you. Yeah, thanks. I mean, yes, no, I will go and do. I want to. There's some of those that I certainly haven't read, so we'll definitely be doing that, and I'm sure other people will want to do the same thing. So thank you. I will source those, and if there's any I can't find, then I will for sure let you know. Yeah. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time. And do you share your Twitter handle as well?
You can follow me on Twitter if you want to. I mean, I'd follow some better accounts, but my Twitter handle is Dr. Wilding. It's David, and then R is a middle name, so it looks like doctor, but I have no medical qualifications. So in fact, my Twitter bio says "not a real doctor, just initials. Sorry to disappoint." And that pretty much sums up my whole Twitter account. But I love it. And I say it's that combination of just stuff that makes me laugh, stuff that I think is important, and just stuff that I think is amazing and want to share, really. So yeah, you can follow me if you want.
Well, thanks very much. Great. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.